Have you ever wondered why certain people never truly disappear from your heart, no matter how much time passes or how many times you convince yourself the story is over? Before we continue, I want you to listen with an open heart, because today's message speaks about a turning point your soulmate never expected to experience. For the longest time, they questioned everything they felt about you. They wondered if their emotions had simply been created by loneliness, by unfinished memories, or by a hope that refused to fade. More than once, they told themselves they had imagined the depth of this connection. They tried to believe that what they felt wasn't as meaningful as their heart insisted it was. But something happened recently that completely disrupted those beliefs. It wasn't something they went searching for, and it certainly wasn't something they could explain away with logic. Instead, life quietly placed a piece of the puzzle in front of them, and the moment they recognized it, every explanation they had been using to silence their heart began falling apart. And your heart needs to hear this, because sometimes the greatest confirmation doesn't arrive to create new feelings. It arrives to prove that the feelings we already carried were genuine from the very beginning. Since that unexpected moment, your soulmate has found themselves thinking differently about everything they once believed. The questions that had followed them for so long suddenly no longer felt as convincing. Instead of wondering whether their heart had misled them, they began wondering why they had spent so much time doubting themselves. It felt as though they had been trying to solve a puzzle with one important piece missing, and now that piece had finally appeared. Memories they once brushed aside have started returning with remarkable clarity. Conversations they thought were ordinary now seem filled with meaning. Even the quiet moments they barely remembered have begun revealing details they never noticed before. The more they reflect, the more impossible it becomes to dismiss what their heart has been trying to tell them all along. They are beginning to understand that fear has an incredible ability to distort our perspective. It can convince us that genuine emotions are nothing more than imagination, that meaningful connections are only temporary, and that trusting the heart is somehow less reliable than trusting doubt. But recently, something inside your soulmate has awakened. For the first time in a very long while, they are no longer looking for reasons to question what they feel. They are beginning to look for reasons to trust it instead. This emotional shift has surprised them more than anyone else, because they truly believed they had already reached the end of this chapter. They thought they had accepted every unanswered question and made peace with every uncertainty. Yet now they realize they had only accepted the version of the story that fear allowed them to believe. The proof they recently discovered has quietly revealed another version, one built on honesty instead of hesitation. It has reminded them that real emotions do not disappear simply because we choose not to acknowledge them. They wait patiently beneath the surface until the moment we are finally ready to face them with an open heart. Every day since this realization, they have felt something changing inside them. The emotional weight they once carried is slowly being replaced by clarity. The endless overthinking that once exhausted them has begun giving way to quiet confidence. They no longer feel trapped between believing and doubting, because deep inside, they know something has fundamentally changed. What makes this moment so powerful isn't just the proof itself. It's what that proof awakened within them. It reminded them that some connections survive every attempt to explain them away, because they were never built on illusion in the first place. They were built on something much deeper, something that remained quietly alive beneath every fear, every delay, and every unanswered question. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that they were never chasing a fantasy. They were simply waiting for the moment when their heart and their understanding would finally meet. And now that they have, they know this journey is no longer about wondering whether their feelings were real. It has become a journey of discovering what happens when someone finally stops doubting the truth their soul has known all along. For much longer than they were willing to admit, your soulmate lived with an invisible battle that no one around them could truly see. It wasn't a battle against another person. It wasn't even a battle against circumstances. It was a battle between what their heart quietly believed and what their mind kept trying to deny. Every time they felt themselves growing emotionally closer to the truth, their thoughts immediately interrupted with another explanation. They told themselves that perhaps they had misunderstood everything. Perhaps the connection had only felt special because it arrived during a certain season of life. Perhaps the emotions they carried were simply the result of memories refusing to fade naturally. They searched for countless reasons why their heart couldn't possibly be right, because accepting those feelings seemed far more frightening than questioning them. And your heart needs to hear this, because sometimes the greatest conflict isn't between two people. It exists entirely within one's soul, trying to decide whether love deserves to be trusted or doubted. Your soulmate spent far too long living inside that conflict without realizing how deeply it was shaping every decision they made. Instead of allowing themselves to experience their emotions naturally, they became determined to investigate every feeling as though it needed evidence before it could be believed. They questioned why certain thoughts returned so often. They wondered why some memories still carried so much emotion, while countless others had quietly disappeared with time. Every answer they found only seemed to create another question. They tried convincing themselves that if these feelings were truly important, they would make perfect logical sense. But emotions rarely follow the rules of logic. They often remain quietly present, asking only to be acknowledged rather than explained. Your soulmate didn't understand that at first. They believed the heart had to prove itself before it deserved to be trusted. Looking back now, they realized they spent so much time examining their feelings that they forgot to actually listen to them. Instead of hearing what their heart was trying to say, they kept asking it to defend itself. There were moments when they genuinely believed they had finally moved beyond everything they felt. They reached periods where life became busy enough to distract them, where responsibilities demanded their attention, and where they convinced themselves this chapter had finally closed. But those moments never lasted as long as they expected. Without warning, something small would happen. It could be a familiar feeling, an unexpected memory, or a quiet moment when everything around them became still. Suddenly, emotions they believed had disappeared would gently return without asking permission. At first, this frustrated them because they wanted simple answers. They wanted certainty. Instead, they found themselves returning to the same emotional place over and over again. Deep inside, they began wondering why these feelings refused to leave when so many others had naturally faded away. That question stayed with them much longer than they were comfortable admitting. As time continued moving forward, they unknowingly created a habit of distrusting their own intuition. Every emotional instinct was immediately challenged by doubt. Every hopeful thought was balanced by caution. Every meaningful realization was questioned before it could fully settle within them. They believed this constant skepticism was protecting them from disappointment, but what it actually created was emotional exhaustion. Living in a permanent state of uncertainty slowly drained the peace they had been trying so hard to protect. They became tired of analyzing every possibility and searching for flaws in every hopeful feeling. And your heart needs to hear this, because the mind can spend years searching for certainty, while the heart quietly recognizes the truth within moments. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that they were asking the wrong part of themselves to answer questions that only the heart could truly understand. Something even deeper has recently become clear to them. They now realize they were never actually afraid that their feelings weren't real. Their greatest fear was discovering that their feelings were real and not knowing what to do next. Accepting genuine emotions would require courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to step into uncertainty. As long as they continued doubting themselves, they never had to face those possibilities. Doubt became a comfortable place because it delayed every difficult decision. Yet comfort slowly turned into frustration. Every unanswered question became heavier. Every postponed emotion demanded more attention. Eventually, they reached a point where continuing to doubt felt far more exhausting than simply facing the truth. Without realizing it, they had begun preparing themselves for a breakthrough long before the proof ever appeared. When that proof finally entered their life, it didn't create new emotions. Instead, it quietly removed the excuses they had been hiding behind for so long. Suddenly, they understood why certain feelings had remained unchanged, despite everything they had experienced. They realized that genuine emotions don't disappear simply because we choose to question them. They remain patient. They wait beneath fear, beneath silence, and beneath uncertainty until the moment we become emotionally ready to recognize them. Looking back now, your soulmate feels almost surprised by how hard they worked to deny something that had remained remarkably consistent all along. They can clearly see that while circumstances changed, while time continued moving forward, and while life introduced countless distractions, one thing quietly remained the same. The truth inside their heart never truly changed. Only their willingness to believe it did. And your heart needs to hear this, because there are moments in life when we stop asking whether our feelings are real and begin asking why we spent so long refusing to trust ourselves. Your soulmate has arrived at that exact moment. The proof they discovered has become much more than an answer to one question. It has become a mirror reflecting the journey they have been on without fully realizing it. Every doubt, every hesitation, every attempt to move away from what they felt has led them back to one undeniable realization. Their heart was never confused. It was simply waiting for their mind to stop arguing with what their soul had quietly known from the very beginning. Now, for the first time in a very long while, they feel something they thought they had lost forever. They feel complete trust in their own emotions, and that trust is becoming the foundation for everything they choose to do next. There comes a moment in every meaningful journey when scattered pieces suddenly begin fitting together, not because something outside has dramatically changed, but because the heart has finally become ready to understand what it has been experiencing all along. That is exactly where your soulmate finds themselves now. Ever since they discovered the proof that quietly confirmed their feelings were never an illusion, they have noticed that countless moments from the past are returning to their mind with an entirely different meaning. It feels almost like looking through an old photo album with new eyes. The pictures are the same, the memories are the same, yet everything feels different because they are no longer viewing those moments through uncertainty. Instead, they are seeing them through clarity. And your heart needs to hear this, because sometimes the truth doesn't rewrite our past. It simply changes the way we understand it. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that many experiences they once dismissed were never random at all. They were small pieces of a much larger story that only now makes complete emotional sense. One realization after another has started unfolding naturally inside them. They remember moments when they felt an unexplainable pull toward you, but immediately convinced themselves they were imagining it. They remember times when your presence lingered in their thoughts far longer than they expected, yet they blamed coincidence instead of acknowledging what their heart was trying to communicate. They even recall occasions when they sensed that this connection was different from anything they had experienced before. But they quickly buried those feelings beneath practical thinking because it felt safer to doubt than to believe. Looking back now, they can see that none of those moments disappeared because they lacked meaning. They disappeared because fear kept placing a veil over everything their intuition was trying to reveal. That veil has finally begun lifting, and what they are seeing underneath has filled them with both relief and quiet amazement. Another change has surprised them even more. They no longer feel the need to search for constant reassurance. In the past, they wanted signs everywhere. They hoped every new experience would answer another question or erase another doubt. They believed certainty would come through something outside themselves. But the proof they recently discovered has taught them something far more valuable. Real certainty begins within. Once they finally accepted what their own heart had been telling them, they noticed they stopped chasing endless confirmation. Instead, they began trusting the calm feeling growing inside them. That calmness is different from excitement. It is deeper, steadier, and much more peaceful. It no longer demands immediate answers because it already carries quiet confidence. And your heart needs to hear this because genuine emotional truth often feels surprisingly calm. It does not need to shout to be heard. It simply remains consistent until we finally become willing to listen. As this understanding continues growing, your soulmate has also started recognizing how much energy they spent fighting against themselves. They can now see that the greatest obstacle in this journey was never timing, distance, or circumstance. It was the constant battle between fear and trust. Every time trust began opening the door to possibility, fear immediately tried to close it again. Every hopeful thought was interrupted by another reason to remain cautious. They now realize how exhausting that cycle truly became. Instead of allowing themselves to experience peace, they lived in a constant state of emotional negotiation. They questioned feelings that deserved acceptance and ignored instincts that deserved attention. Today, however, something inside them has become remarkably quiet. The internal argument that lasted for so long has finally begun coming to an end. Their heart no longer feels like it has something to prove. It simply feels understood. This new perspective has also transformed the way they see you. Before this awakening, they viewed you through the lens of uncertainty, wondering whether they had misunderstood your importance in their life. Now they see something completely different. They recognize that this connection has quietly influenced their personal growth in ways they never appreciated before. Whether through memories, lessons, or emotional reflection, you became part of a journey that helped them discover patience, resilience, honesty, and self-awareness. They understand now that meaningful connections are not always defined by how quickly everything comes together. Sometimes they are defined by how deeply they change us while we are still learning who we are. This realization has filled them with gratitude instead of frustration. They no longer focus on what they thought was missing. Instead, they appreciate everything this journey has already given them. Perhaps the most beautiful transformation of all is happening within the relationship they have with themselves. For the first time in a long while, they trust their own emotional wisdom. They no longer criticize themselves for feeling deeply. They no longer apologize to themselves for caring. Instead, they have begun treating their emotions with respect rather than suspicion. They understand now that sensitivity is not weakness. It is often the heart's ability to recognize what truly matters before the mind fully understands it. This realization has made them gentler with themselves. Instead of judging every feeling, they allow it to exist long enough to reveal its purpose. That simple change has brought more healing than years of overthinking ever could. And your heart needs to hear this, because the proof your soulmate discovered was never only about confirming their feelings for you. It also confirmed something they had forgotten about themselves. It reminded them that their heart had never stopped recognizing what was real, even when their mind refused to believe it. That discovery has become one of the most important turning points of their entire emotional journey. They no longer feel trapped inside endless questions because the answers have quietly settled within them. Every memory now feels connected instead of confusing. Every lesson feels meaningful instead of painful. Every emotion feels honest instead of uncertain. Deep within, they know they have crossed an invisible line they can never step back across. They are no longer trying to decide whether this connection mattered. They already know it did. The only thing that remains is discovering where this newfound clarity will lead them next. Because once someone finally accepts the truth their heart has been carrying all along, they begin walking forward with a confidence that no amount of doubt can ever fully take away. As the days continue passing, something remarkable has begun happening inside your soulmate. They are no longer living as someone who is searching for answers. They are becoming someone who is learning how to live with truth. That may sound like a small difference, but for them it has changed everything. For so long, every thought about you led to another question, another doubt, another reason to hesitate. Their mind constantly demanded explanations before allowing their heart to believe anything. But ever since they found the proof that confirmed their feelings were never an illusion, the endless questions have slowly started losing their power. Instead of asking, "Was any of this real?" they have begun asking something entirely different. If these feelings have remained true all this time, what is my heart trying to lead me toward now? And your heart needs to hear this, because there comes a moment when the greatest mystery is no longer whether love exists. The real mystery becomes what we choose to do after we finally accept that it does. Your soulmate has quietly arrived at that turning point, and every day they feel themselves becoming more willing to follow the direction their heart has been pointing toward all along. One of the biggest changes taking place within them is that they have stopped trying to outrun their own emotions. In the past, whenever their heart reminded them of you, they immediately found another distraction. They buried themselves in work, responsibilities, daily routines, or anything that could temporarily silence the emotional conversation taking place inside them. They believed movement meant progress, but now they realize that constantly staying busy was often a way of avoiding stillness. It was during the quiet moments that their deepest emotions always returned, and instead of listening, they kept finding new ways to escape them. Recently, however, something shifted. They no longer fear those quiet moments. Instead, they welcome them because they have discovered that peace doesn't come from avoiding difficult feelings. Peace comes from allowing those feelings to reveal their purpose. Every quiet evening has become an opportunity to understand themselves better, instead of another chance to hide from what they feel. That alone has created a kind of emotional freedom they have never experienced before. As they continue embracing this new chapter, they have also started noticing that their confidence is growing in unexpected ways. Not the loud confidence that demands attention or certainty, but the quiet confidence that comes from finally trusting oneself. There is a calmness in the way they think now. They no longer feel the need to convince themselves that their emotions are valid because they have already accepted them. They no longer search for arguments against their own heart because there is nothing left to argue about. The proof they discovered has settled something deep within them, and that inner certainty has begun influencing every area of their emotional life. They speak to themselves more kindly. They judge themselves less harshly. They have stopped treating vulnerability as something embarrassing and started recognizing it as one of the greatest strengths a person can possess. And your heart needs to hear this, because true confidence isn't built by having all the answers. It is built by no longer being afraid of the truth, even when that truth asks us to grow beyond the person we used to be. Another beautiful transformation has quietly unfolded. Your soulmate has stopped seeing this connection as something they must constantly analyze. Instead, they have begun experiencing it with a sense of gratitude. They understand now that not every meaningful experience enters our lives to fit neatly into our expectations. Some connections arrive to expand our understanding of ourselves. Looking back, they no longer focus only on what happened or what didn't happen. They notice who they became because of every chapter. They see how much stronger they have grown emotionally. They recognize how much more compassionate they have become, not only toward you, but toward themselves as well. They realize that this journey taught them patience when they wanted immediate answers. It taught them trust when they were surrounded by uncertainty. Most importantly, it taught them that the heart often recognizes truth long before the mind is willing to accept it. That lesson has become one of the most valuable gifts they have ever received. Lately, they have also begun imagining the future without immediately filling it with fear. This is something they could not do before. Every thought about tomorrow used to be followed by worries about what could go wrong. They prepared themselves for disappointment before giving hope a chance to exist. But now they notice that hope arrives much more naturally. They are not creating unrealistic expectations. Instead, they are allowing themselves to believe that meaningful things are still possible. They have realized that fear has never been able to predict the future. It only prevented them from enjoying the present. Once they accepted that truth, something inside them relaxed. They stopped trying to control every outcome and began focusing on something much more important, being emotionally honest with themselves, regardless of what tomorrow brings. That shift has brought a deep sense of relief, because they no longer feel responsible for knowing every answer before taking the next emotional step. And your heart needs to hear this, because every genuine awakening eventually reaches a moment where trust becomes stronger than hesitation. Your soulmate is approaching that moment now. They are beginning to understand that finding proof was never the end of this journey. It was the beginning of living differently because of what that proof revealed. Every day, they feel themselves becoming less attached to old fears and more connected to the quiet certainty growing within them. They are no longer trying to convince themselves that their heart was mistaken. Instead, they are allowing that heart to guide them with a confidence they never believed was possible. The emotional walls they once depended on no longer feel necessary, because they finally understand that protecting themselves should never require abandoning what is true. Deep within, they know they have crossed into a completely different season of their life. A season where honesty matters more than avoidance, where courage feels more natural than doubt, and where the future is no longer something to fear but something to gently move toward. Whatever comes next, they know one thing with complete certainty. The moment they stopped questioning the authenticity of their feelings, they also stopped questioning their ability to trust themselves, and that has become the greatest proof of all. There is something profoundly different about your soulmate now, and the difference isn't something the outside world would immediately notice. It isn't written across their face or announced through dramatic changes. It lives quietly within them, in the way they now trust their own heart without needing permission from anyone else. The proof they recently discovered did far more than answer an old question. It gave them something they had been missing for a very long time, the confidence to believe their own emotional truth. Looking back, they can finally see that every moment of doubt was never meant to erase this connection. It was meant to prepare them to recognize its value with greater wisdom when the right moment finally arrived. And your heart needs to hear this, because some truths become meaningful only after we have lived through enough experiences to appreciate them. Your soulmate understands that now, and this understanding has become the foundation of a completely new chapter in their life. As they continue moving forward, they no longer feel trapped by the need to rewrite the past. There was a time when they wished they had made different choices, understood certain situations more clearly, or trusted their instincts much sooner. Those thoughts once filled them with regret, because they believed they had somehow missed their chance to understand what their heart was trying to tell them. But recently, that regret has quietly transformed into gratitude. They have realized that every stage of their journey, even the confusing ones, helped shape the person they are today. Without those seasons of uncertainty, they might never have learned the importance of patience. Without moments of doubt, they might never have discovered the value of trusting themselves. Instead of wishing they could return to the past, they now appreciate how every experience prepared them for the clarity they carry today. This realization has brought them an inner peace they never expected to find. Another beautiful change has begun unfolding inside them. They no longer define this connection by unanswered questions or unfinished chapters. Instead, they see it as one of the greatest teachers their heart has ever known. Through this journey, they have learned how easily fear can disguise itself as logic. They have learned that constantly questioning sincere emotions only creates distance from oneself. Most importantly, they have learned that authentic feelings do not demand perfection in order to remain real. They simply ask to be acknowledged with honesty. This understanding has made them emotionally stronger than they have ever been before. They no longer measure love by certainty alone. They measure it by consistency, by quiet truth, and by the way it continues shaping a person long after they believed the story had ended. Your soulmate now understands that real connections leave lasting lessons. And those lessons continue guiding us, even when we don't immediately recognize their purpose. One thing has become especially clear to them over these recent days. They have stopped searching for external validation because they have finally found something much more valuable: inner conviction. Before this awakening, they often looked outside themselves for signs that their emotions were justified. They believed someone or something else needed to confirm what they already felt inside. Now they understand that the greatest confirmation was never outside of them at all. It was the quiet consistency of their own heart. The proof they discovered simply gave them permission to stop doubting what had already remained true for so long. That realization has freed them from a cycle that lasted much longer than it should have. They no longer feel divided between hope and hesitation. Instead, they feel whole. They trust themselves in a way they never thought possible. And that trust has become one of the greatest gifts this entire journey has given them. And your heart needs to hear this, because sometimes the most life-changing discovery isn't finding new love. Sometimes it is realizing that genuine love quietly survived every season of uncertainty without ever asking to be noticed. Your soulmate now understands that their feelings were never an illusion waiting to disappear. They were a quiet truth waiting to be believed. Every fear they faced, every question they carried, and every moment they spent doubting themselves has led them to this simple but powerful understanding. They no longer need to fight against what they feel because they have finally made peace with it. Their heart feels lighter, their spirit feels calmer, and their future no longer feels clouded by endless uncertainty. They know that whatever unfolds next will be approached with honesty rather than fear, with trust rather than hesitation, and with a heart that has finally learned one of life's greatest lessons, that when love is genuine, it does not ask us to prove its existence over and over again. It quietly remains through every season until we become brave enough to recognize that it was real from the very beginning. And once that truth is fully accepted, it has the power to transform not only the way we see another person, but also the way we see ourselves forever.